America's most important military system does not look like a weapon. It does not sit on a runway. It does not sail with a carrier strike group. It does not fire from a launcher or roar across the sky with an afterburner. It is almost invisible, a signal from space, a whisper so weak it can be drowned out before it even reaches the ground. And yet, without that whisper, much of modern American military power begins to slow down, blur, and lose its rhythm. Missiles still fly, ships still move, aircraft still take off. But the invisible grid that tells them where they are going, and exactly when everything must happen, starts to crack. That is why GPS is not just a navigation tool. It is not the thing that helps your phone find a coffee shop. It is a military timing system hiding in plain sight. It helps synchronize radios, guide precision weapons, coordinate drones, move logistics, align networks, and keep entire operations moving on the same invisible clock. The shocking part is this: America does not protect GPS because soldiers need directions. America protects GPS because modern war needs time. By the end of this episode, you will understand why GPS may be one of the most valuable military infrastructures ever built, why enemies do not need to destroy it to attack it, and why the next war may begin with a very simple question: can America still trust the signal? This is Battletech Declassified. Modern Warfare Explained. The map is the distraction. That is the first trap with GPS. Most people hear those three letters and think about the blue dot on a phone. They think about a car turning left in 300 meters, a delivery driver finding the right street, or a hiker checking which trail leads back to the parking lot. That is the civilian face of GPS. It is useful, familiar, and so normal that it feels almost boring. But that familiar version hides the real machine underneath. GPS is not just a map. It is a global measurement system. It tells a receiver where it is by comparing signals from satellites, and those signals are tied to extremely precise time. The position you see is really the result of timing math. Your device is not asking space for directions. It is listening to several satellites, measuring tiny differences in signal arrival, and turning those differences into location. That sounds technical, but the simple version is this: GPS works because space gives Earth a shared ruler and a shared clock. Now imagine a battlefield without that shared ruler and shared clock. A ship may still know the ocean is around it, but not exactly where it sits in the kill chain. A drone may still fly, but it may no longer trust the coordinates it is using. A missile may still leave the launcher, but a tiny error in timing can grow into a large error in distance. A commander may still have radios, maps, satellites, aircraft, and sensors, but the whole picture becomes harder to align. It is like trying to conduct an orchestra where every musician is playing from a slightly different clock. The violin section starts half a second late. The drums are convinced the song is somewhere else. The brass section is loud, confident, and wrong. Modern warfare is not just about having powerful instruments. It is about making them play together. GPS became one of the quiet systems that lets America play together at military scale. That is why the map is not the real story. The real story is synchronization. Time is not just something clocks measure. In modern war, time is a weapon. That sounds strange at first, because when people imagine weapons, they imagine things that explode. They imagine missiles, bombs, rifles, submarines, aircraft, and artillery. But a missile that arrives too early can miss the window. A drone that transmits too late can lose the target. A radar track that is not time-aligned with another sensor can create confusion instead of clarity. A logistics convoy that reaches the wrong point at the wrong hour can create a bottleneck. A command order that moves through the network slowly can turn a good decision into a late decision. Time is the invisible rail that every modern system rides on. If the rail bends, the train may still move, but it no longer arrives where the plan expected it to arrive. That is why timing is not a background detail. It is the hidden skeleton of the whole operation. GPS gives the military something more valuable than most people realize: a common sense of now, not a rough now, not the kind of now you get from a wristwatch, a precise now that machines can use. Think of a football team where every player has a different idea of when the play begins. The quarterback starts, the receiver waits, The offensive line moves late. The defense does not need to be stronger. It just needs the offense to lose timing. That is what attacks on GPS can do to a military built on speed. They do not always have to destroy the weapon. They can make the weapon late, uncertain, or less coordinated. In old wars, armies often fought over bridges, roads, railways, and ports because those were the pathways of movement. In modern war, armies also fight over timing because timing is the pathway of coordination. GPS became powerful because it placed a shared clock over the battlefield, and the side that controls the clock can often control the tempo. A battlefield is not one place anymore. It is a moving system spread across land, sea, air, space, and cyber. A fighter aircraft may be hundreds of miles away from a ship. A drone may be watching a road in silence. A satellite may be passing overhead. A submarine may be receiving limited updates below the surface. A missile battery may be waiting for coordinates. A command center may be trying to turn all of that into one decision. Each piece is separate, but the goal is to make them behave like one organism. That is the dream of modern command and control. See first, decide first, shoot first, move first. But that dream depends on a shared reference. Every sensor report needs a place. Every place needs a time. Every time needs to be trusted. GPS helps create that reference. It does not make every decision by itself. It does something quieter. It gives machines and humans a common framework so their decisions can connect. Picture a battlefield map inside a command center. Icons move across the screen. Aircraft, ships, ground units, drones, friendly positions, suspected enemy launchers, possible threats, supply routes, and target boxes. It looks clean from the outside, but underneath that picture is a constant fight against chaos. Where did this track come from? When was it updated? Is that drone feed still current? Is that unit really there? Or was it there 2 minutes ago? Is the target moving? Is the coordinate accurate enough to strike? The answer to each question depends on trusted timing and trusted location. Without those, the picture becomes less like a map and more like a rumor board. Some pieces may be true, some may be stale, some may be slightly wrong. And in war, slightly wrong can be deadly. GPS helps reduce that uncertainty. It gives the military a battlefield clock, and that clock allows thousands of moving pieces to act as if they are part of the same machine. GPS began as a military advantage, then became a civilian habit, then became a global dependency. That is the strange path of many powerful technologies. First, they are built for survival, competition, or war. Then they become useful. Then they become normal. Then one day society wakes up and realizes that normal has become necessary. GPS followed that path almost perfectly. What began as a way to give the United States precise positioning from space eventually became embedded into phones, cars, ships, aircraft, banking systems, telecom networks, farms, emergency services, and global logistics. The more reliable it became, the less people noticed it. That is how infrastructure disappears. A bridge is impressive when it is new. After a while, it is just the way people cross the river. GPS became a bridge made of signals. It crosses distance, timing, and uncertainty. And because everyone uses it, everyone forgets how much is resting on it. This is where military dependency becomes more complicated. The U.S. military does not operate in a separate universe from civilian infrastructure. It uses ports, commercial communications, contractors, financial systems, shipping networks, power grids, cloud services, roads, and global supply chains. If GPS is disrupted, the effect is not limited to a soldier holding a receiver. It can ripple into the wider environment that military operations depend on. That is the hidden danger of success. The better a system becomes, the more everyone builds around it. GPS is like electricity in that sense. When the lights are on, nobody praises the grid. They just work, cook, charge devices, run factories, and live their lives. But when the grid fails, people suddenly see how much of daily life was plugged into it. GPS is similar. When it works, it is invisible. When it fails, the world becomes aware of the invisible architecture that was quietly holding everything together. The military often uses the phrase PNT. That stands for Positioning, Navigation, and Timing. It sounds like another cold acronym, the kind that belongs in a planning document nobody wants to read. But PNT is actually simple. Positioning answers the question, where am I? Navigation answers the question, how do I get where I need to go? Timing answers the question, when exactly is this happening? Put those three together, and you get something far bigger than a map. You get the ability to move, coordinate, strike, communicate, and verify in a shared reality. A soldier needs positioning. A ship needs navigation. A network needs timing. A missile needs all three. That is why GPS is so powerful. It does not solve one problem. It feeds three basic ingredients into a huge number of military systems. Like flour, water, and heat in a kitchen, those ingredients show up in many different meals. The danger is that people tend to see only the positioning part. They imagine a dot on a screen and stop there. But in many ways, timing may be the deeper dependency. Telecommunications networks need precise time to keep signals organized. Financial systems use timing to order transactions. Power grids use timing for stability and monitoring. Military networks use timing to align data and coordinate action. If positioning is the visible face of GPS, timing is the heartbeat. You may not see your heartbeat when you look in the mirror, but everything depends on it. GPS gives America a heartbeat from space. Satellites broadcast signals, receivers calculate, systems synchronize, and suddenly, thousands of separate machines can behave as if they share one nervous system. That is the true military pillar. Not just knowing where the tank is, not just telling the pilot where to fly, but giving the entire force a shared sense of location and time, so decisions can move at machine speed instead of guesswork speed. Before GPS, navigation was a more human art. It used maps, stars, radio beacons, landmarks, compasses, inertial systems, dead reckoning, and experience. None of that disappeared completely. Many of those methods still matter, but GPS changed the default expectation. It made precise location feel available almost anywhere, almost all the time. That was revolutionary. A map can tell you where the mountain is. A compass can tell you which direction you face. A navigator can estimate movement over time. But GPS gives a machine an answer that can be updated again and again. It turns location from something you infer into something you continuously calculate. That is like the difference between checking your bank balance once a month and watching every transaction update in real time. The old methods can still work, but the speed and confidence are different. GPS gave commanders, pilots, sailors, soldiers, and machines a faster way to anchor themselves in space. This matters because modern operations move too quickly for slow uncertainty. A carrier strike group cannot treat the ocean like a blank blue space. A bomber cannot treat a target coordinate like a rough suggestion. A drone swarm cannot coordinate if every drone has a different idea of where the formation is. An artillery unit cannot shift fires efficiently if coordinates are unreliable. GPS made the battlefield more measurable. And once war becomes more measurable, it becomes more programmable. Routes can be planned, strikes can be timed, supply movements can be tracked, search patterns can be coordinated, sensors can be fused. But this also creates a new weakness. If the measurement layer is attacked, the entire system has to work harder. It is like taking glasses away from someone who can still walk, but no longer reads the room clearly. America built a military that sees, moves, and strikes through precise measurement. GPS became one of the systems that made that possible. Precision strike changed the psychology of war. For much of military history, hitting a target from distance was messy. You could aim at an area, fire many rounds, and hope enough force landed close enough to matter. Accuracy existed, but it was limited by weather, visibility, human calculation, weapon design, and the movement of the target. Then modern guidance systems changed the equation. GPS was not the only part of that revolution, but it became one of its most important pillars. Once a weapon could understand where it was and where it needed to go, the idea of striking a precise coordinate became far more realistic. War did not become clean. That is a myth. But the military gained the ability to concentrate force with much higher precision than before. A target was no longer just a general area on a map. It could become a specific point in a wider network of decisions. Think of it like throwing a rock versus sending a delivery package. A rock depends mostly on the thrower. A delivery package depends on an address, a route, a tracking system, and timing. Precision weapons are closer to that second idea. They need an address in the physical world. They need guidance. They need confidence that the address is real, current, and accurate. GPS helps provide that address layer, especially against fixed or pre-planned targets, but this creates a cruel dependency. The more precise your weapons become, the more painful it is when precision becomes uncertain. If the signal is jammed, spoofed, degraded, or denied, the military may still have options. It can use inertial navigation, terrain matching, laser guidance, seekers, human control, or other aids. But the operation becomes more complex. The clean coordinate becomes a contested coordinate. That is why enemies study GPS. They understand that modern American power is not only in the explosion, it is in the accuracy before the explosion. Logistics is where GPS stops looking like a high-tech military tool and starts looking like the bloodstream of war. Every army needs fuel, food, ammunition, spare parts, medical support, replacement equipment, repair crews, transportation, storage, and timing. A tank without fuel is a statue. A jet without parts is a museum piece. A missile battery without resupply becomes a temporary threat. This is why logistics often decides wars before the dramatic footage begins. GPS helps make logistics visible. Trucks can be tracked. Ships can be routed. Aircraft can be scheduled. Containers can be monitored. Convoys can be coordinated. Fuel movements can be timed. Commanders can see not just where combat units are, but where the support system is. That matters because the side that moves supplies faster can often keep fighting longer. The side that loses track of supplies may lose tempo before it loses battles. Imagine running a giant restaurant during a rush hour that lasts for months. Every table is moving. Every order changes. The kitchen needs ingredients. The servers need timing. The delivery trucks need routes. The manager needs to know what is running out before it runs out. That is military logistics, except the restaurant is spread across continents and the customers may be under fire. GPS does not solve every logistical problem, but it gives the system eyes and timing. It makes movement less blind. It allows planners to compress the distance between need and delivery. If a unit burns through ammunition faster than expected, the supply chain has to respond. If a port becomes unsafe, routes must shift. If an aircraft needs a part, the part must arrive before the aircraft becomes useless. GPS supports that choreography. It is not glamorous, but war is often won by the side whose boring systems keep working. GPS is one of those boring systems, until it stops working. Then it becomes the center of the story. The ocean makes GPS even more important because the sea gives humans almost nothing to hold on to. On land, there are roads, rivers, cities, hills, bridges, and borders. At sea, there is water, horizon, weather, and distance. A ship can be powerful and still be alone inside a huge moving environment. Naval warfare depends on knowing where you are, where your allies are, where the threat might be, and where you need to be next. A carrier strike group is not just a carrier. It is a moving constellation of ships, aircraft, sensors, weapons, logistics vessels, and command links. Every part of that constellation has to manage space and timing. GPS helps turn the ocean from a blank surface into an operational grid. It allows movement to be planned, formations to be maintained, aircraft to launch and recover, and long-range weapons to connect with coordinates that may be far beyond the visible horizon. But the sea also exposes the vulnerability. A ship that depends too comfortably on satellite navigation may become less comfortable when the signal is jammed, spoofed, or degraded near a contested zone. Naval forces train with backups for a reason. They use inertial navigation, charts, radar fixes, celestial methods, visual bearings, and other tools. But GPS still became a central convenience because it is fast, precise, and always there, until someone tries to make it not there. Think of a sailor crossing a dark room filled with furniture. With the lights on, movement is smooth. With the lights flickering, every step slows. That is the operational effect of GPS disruption at sea. It does not automatically sink ships. It changes confidence, speed, and risk. In naval warfare, where missiles move fast and distances are enormous, confidence is not a luxury, it is part of survival. GPS helps create that confidence. Losing it means the Navy must fight harder to rebuild the picture. Air power has an even more intense relationship with timing. Because aircraft live inside speed, a ship can slow down, a ground unit can pause, an aircraft has less room for hesitation. It moves through three-dimensional space, across long distances, often at high speed, while coordinating with tankers, other aircraft, ground controllers, ships, satellites, and command centers. It needs navigation, but it also needs timing. When should it arrive? When should it refuel? When does the strike package cross a line? When does suppression begin? When does the target window open? When does the aircraft leave before enemy defenses react? GPS helps give air power a shared clock and a shared coordinate system. That does not make pilots irrelevant. It makes the larger system more coordinated around them. Picture a complex air operation as a highway interchange in the sky, except the cars are moving hundreds of miles per hour and some of them are carrying weapons. If one vehicle is late, the whole flow changes. If one sensor report is stale, the threat picture shifts. If one tanker is not where the plan expects it to be, range becomes a problem. If a weapon receives bad coordinates, the strike becomes uncertain. GPS supports the invisible choreography that makes all of this possible. This is especially important because modern air power is not just about aircraft flying to a target. It is about networks. Fighters receive data. Bombers receive updates. Drones pass information. Tankers extend reach. Command nodes manage timing. Electronic warfare aircraft shape the environment. GPS is one of the quiet systems that helps keep that dance from turning into traffic. And because air power depends on tempo, anything that disrupts trusted timing can become a form of air defense without firing a missile. Drones make the GPS story even more important because drones are often sold to the public as symbols of autonomy. People hear the word autonomous and imagine machines that simply think for themselves. But many drones still depend on external references. They need to know where they are, where the mission area is, where friendly forces are, where restricted zones are, and how to return or loiter. Some can navigate without GPS for periods of time, using inertial systems, cameras, terrain matching, or other techniques. But GPS remains a common and useful backbone because it is cheap, available, and easy to integrate. That is why drone warfare and GPS warfare are deeply connected. A small drone may look simple, but its relationship with position and timing can decide whether it is a scout, a weapon, or a confused machine drifting through noise. This creates a battlefield where the fight is not just drone against drone or missile against drone. It is signal against signal. A defender may jam GPS to confuse incoming drones. An attacker may use anti-jam antennas, inertial backups, preloaded routes, visual navigation, or human control to keep drones moving. A drone that loses GPS might not immediately fall from the sky, but it may lose accuracy, confidence, or mission effectiveness. Think of a robot vacuum in a dark house after someone keeps moving the furniture. It can still move. It can still bump around, but its clean map is gone. Now scale that idea up into war, where the furniture is air defenses, ships, buildings, hills, decoys, and moving targets. GPS helps drones turn space into instructions. When that reference becomes contested, the drone has to become smarter, or the mission becomes weaker. That is why the future of GPS is tied to the future of autonomy. The more machines fight, the more they need to trust where and when they are. Missiles are often described by their range, speed, warhead, and cost. Those are important. But a missile is also a moving math problem. It leaves one point, travels through a changing environment, and tries to arrive at another point with enough accuracy to matter. The longer the distance, the more small errors can grow. A tiny difference in timing, position, or velocity can become a meaningful miss. GPS helps correct that. It gives some weapons a way to update their understanding of location during flight. It can work with inertial navigation, where internal sensors estimate movement from the launch point. Inertial navigation is useful, but it can drift over time. GPS can help correct that drift. The result is a weapon that is not just thrown, it is guided. But guided weapons create guided vulnerabilities. If a weapon expects to use GPS and the signal becomes unreliable, the weapon must rely more heavily on other systems. Sometimes that is manageable. Sometimes it reduces accuracy. Sometimes the weapon needs a different guidance method entirely. This is why advanced militaries do not want one navigation method. They want layers. GPS, inertial systems, seekers, terrain references, data links, human updates, and other aids. The reason is simple. A single source of truth becomes a single point of pressure. If the enemy can attack that source, they can affect many weapons at once. It is like changing the street signs in a city during a delivery rush. Some drivers may know the city well enough to continue. Some may have backup maps. Others may slow down, reroute, or deliver to the wrong place. GPS gives missiles precision, but precision has to be defended. Otherwise, the weapon may still be fast, expensive, and dangerous, but less certain. And in modern war, certainty is part of lethality. Networks also need GPS, but not always in the way people expect. A network is not just wires, radios, satellites, antennas, and screens. A network is an agreement about order. Which signal came first? Which packet belongs where? Which sensor update is newest? Which unit is reporting now? Which message should be trusted? Timing helps answer those questions. In civilian life, telecom networks and financial systems rely on precise timing to keep massive digital flows organized. In military life, timing is equally important because the network is not moving cat videos and bank transfers. It is moving sensor data, targeting information, orders, warnings, and battlefield updates. If time becomes uncertain, the network becomes harder to trust. Imagine a group chat during an emergency where messages arrive out of order. Someone says, "Turn left." Then another message appears saying, "Do not turn left." Then a third message appears with a timestamp that looks older but might actually be newer. The problem is not communication alone. The problem is sequence. A modern military network has to know not just what was said, but when it was true. GPS timing helps provide that sequence. It allows systems to align data across distance. Radar tracks, drone feeds, satellite updates, radio messages, and command decisions can be compared more accurately when they share time. Without that, the battlefield picture can become smeared. The enemy may not need to hide everything. They may only need to introduce enough timing doubt that the commander hesitates. This is why GPS is not just a navigation system. It is part of the trust architecture of modern war. It helps machines agree on reality fast enough for humans to act. GPS can be understood as a kind of military internet, not because it sends emails or hosts websites, but because it gives many systems a shared layer they can build on. The actual internet works because devices follow common rules. GPS works differently, but the effect is similar in one important way. It gives separate machines a common reference. A ship, a drone, a truck, a missile, a radio tower, a command center, and a satellite terminal can all use the same invisible grid. Once that grid is accepted, planners can build systems around it. Software can assume it. Weapons can use it. Logistics tools can depend on it. Training can include it. Doctrine can evolve around it. That is what makes GPS so powerful. It is not just a product, it is a platform. Platforms become dangerous when they become too successful. When everyone builds on the same foundation, that foundation becomes priceless. It also becomes a target. Think of a city built around one central train station. At first, the station creates growth. Shops appear, offices open, homes connect, commuters rely on it. The whole city becomes more efficient. But if the station closes, the same efficiency turns into fragility. GPS has a similar role in the military ecosystem. It made operations faster and more precise. It allowed thousands of tools to share a common reference. But now, adversaries understand that attacking the reference layer can create outsized effects. They do not have to match every American weapon one for one. They can attack the assumptions those weapons share. That is a different kind of warfare. It is less cinematic than a missile strike, but potentially just as important. The side that controls the foundation can shape the fight before the first obvious shot is fired. This is where the $50 billion idea needs to be handled carefully. America does not simply write one clean check labeled GPS for $50 billion every year. The official GPS program budget is much lower than that, but the number still points toward a real question. How much is GPS worth when the entire military and huge parts of the civilian economy depend on positioning, navigation, and timing from space? That is the better way to understand it, not as a narrow budget line. As strategic value, GPS is like the foundation under a skyscraper. The foundation may not cost as much as every office, elevator, server room, apartment, and store above it. But if the foundation cracks, the value at risk becomes enormous. So the smarter title is not really about a receipt. It is about hidden dependency. America spends money maintaining, modernizing, protecting, and backing up the GPS enterprise because the cost of losing trusted GPS could be far larger than the cost of sustaining it. Economists can estimate civilian losses. Military planners can estimate operational risk. But the deeper cost is harder to measure. What is the price of slower decisions in combat? What is the price of a missile that misses by enough to require another strike? What is the price of a supply chain that becomes confused during a crisis? What is the price of commanders losing confidence in the shared picture? Those costs do not always appear as a neat number in a budget document. They appear as friction. And friction is deadly because it spreads quietly. It makes everything slower, heavier, and less certain. That is why GPS should be treated less like a gadget and more like strategic infrastructure. The exact annual spending number matters, but the value at risk matters more. The civilian side of GPS is not separate from the military story. It is part of the trap. Civilian society became so comfortable with GPS that the dependency spread far beyond maps. Transportation uses it. Shipping uses it. Aviation uses it. Agriculture uses it. Emergency services use it. Telecom networks use timing from it. Financial systems use precise timing. Construction, surveying, energy, and logistics all benefit from it. This means GPS is not just a military asset with civilian benefits. It is a shared utility that modern society has quietly wrapped around itself. And because the military operates inside that society, civilian vulnerability can become military vulnerability during a crisis. Imagine a major conflict where GPS disruption is not global, but regional. Ports become less efficient. Commercial shipping slows. Emergency coordination becomes harder. Telecom timing has to rely more heavily on backups. Financial networks become more cautious. Trucking and rail systems face delays. Farmers using precision agriculture lose accuracy. Civil aviation faces rerouting or additional safety procedures. None of this means civilization instantly collapses. That is not the point. The point is that the system becomes less smooth. And modern war punishes loss of smoothness. A military campaign depends on civilian contractors, transportation networks, communications, fuel flows, maintenance systems, and economic stability. When GPS is attacked, the shock can travel through civilian systems before it reaches the battlefield directly. That is why GPS defense is not only a Pentagon problem, it is a national resilience problem. The enemy may not need to defeat every American weapon. They may try to stress the society and infrastructure those weapons depend on. GPS sits right in the middle of that overlap. A major GPS outage can be measured in money, but money is only the easiest language. Estimates of disruption costs can reach enormous numbers because GPS touches so many industries at once. If the signal disappears or becomes unreliable, businesses do not just lose convenience, they lose timing, tracking, routing, synchronization, and confidence. A delivery may still happen, but later. A network may still run, but with more backup procedures. A ship may still navigate, but with more caution. A farm machine may still work, but with less precision. A financial system may still process, but with greater dependence on alternative timing sources. The damage is not always dramatic at first. It is cumulative. It is like sand getting into gears. One grain is nothing. Millions of grains change the machine. For the military, that lesson is crucial. The first effect of GPS disruption may not be explosions. It may be delay. Delay in confirming positions. Delay in aligning data. Delay in moving supplies. Delay in approving fires. Delay in trusting coordinates. Delay in deciding whether a signal is real or false. Delay sounds harmless until you put it inside a missile fight, an air defense window, a naval engagement, or a drone swarm attack. Then delay becomes survival. If an enemy can buy 30 seconds of confusion at the right moment, that may matter more than destroying a billion-dollar platform. If they can force commanders to double-check every coordinate, they slow the entire kill chain. That is the deeper meaning of the $1 billion day idea. GPS disruption is expensive because it attacks efficiency at scale. In war, efficiency at scale is not just a business advantage, it is combat power. America cares about GPS because losing it would not create one problem. It would create thousands of small problems at the same time. So what happens when GPS goes dark? The honest answer is not that every system instantly fails. Modern militaries are not that simple. Many platforms have backups. Aircraft can use inertial navigation. Ships can use charts, radar, visual fixes, celestial navigation, and other methods. Ground units can use maps, compasses, landmarks, and radio procedures. Weapons can use alternative guidance. Networks can use backup timing sources. The military knows GPS can be contested, so it does not assume perfect access forever. But backups are not magic. They often mean reduced accuracy, slower operations, more workload, more training burden, and more uncertainty. The lights do not go out everywhere. They flicker in the places where confidence used to be automatic. That flicker is the story. A commander who previously trusted the blue icon now asks when it was last confirmed. A pilot who expected smooth navigation now cross-checks more systems. A drone operator who trusted a route now wonders whether the drone is being fooled. A logistics planner who tracked a convoy in real time may rely on slower updates. A missile planner may need different guidance assumptions. Nothing about this is glamorous. It is paperwork, procedures, doubt, cross-checking, and delay. But wars are often decided inside those boring frictions. GPS does not have to vanish worldwide to matter. Local denial near a battlefield can force a military to operate in a more manual, more cautious, more mentally expensive way. It is like forcing a Formula One driver to race with a fogged windshield. The engine still works. The tires still grip. The driver still knows how to drive. But the speed advantage is no longer clean. GPS going dark does not end modern war. It makes modern war heavier. Jamming is the cheap attack. It is not subtle. It does not need to be elegant. It works by overwhelming the receiver with noise on or near the frequencies it needs to hear. GPS signals arrive from satellites very far away, and by the time they reach Earth, they are weak. That weakness is normal, and receivers are designed for it. But it also means that a jammer can create a local bubble where the real signal becomes hard to hear. Think of trying to hear one person whisper across a football field while someone next to you blasts music through a speaker. The whisper may still exist. The problem is that your ear cannot separate it from the noise. That is jamming. Simple in concept, serious in effect. The military response is not one thing. It is a toolbox. Better antennas can reject some interference. Stronger military signals can help. Receivers can detect anomalies. Platforms can switch to backup navigation. Units can train to operate without GPS. Commanders can identify jamming sources and attack them. But every countermeasure costs something. It costs money, weight, complexity, training time, or operational attention. That is why jamming is attractive to adversaries. A relatively cheap system can force expensive defenses and slower procedures. This is classic cost imposition. If I can spend little to make you spend a lot, I do not have to match your entire military. I just have to attack the points where your military is most dependent. GPS jamming is not a magic button. It does not guarantee victory, but it changes the environment. It turns the invisible grid into contested terrain. And once timing and position become contested, every system built on them has to prove it can still fight. Spoofing is more dangerous psychologically than jamming. because it does not simply shout over the truth, it imitates the truth. A jammer says, "You cannot hear the signal." A spoofer says, "Here is the signal, trust me." That is more frightening because a system may continue operating while being quietly misled. If jamming is like fog, spoofing is like fake road signs. You can still see, you can still move, you may even feel confident, but the confidence is being redirected. In a civilian context, spoofing can mislead ships, drones, vehicles, or timing systems. In a military context, the implications are serious. A false position can be worse than no position because it creates false certainty. Modern receivers and military systems can use authentication, signal checks, inertial comparisons, antenna patterns, and other methods to detect spoofing. But the broader lesson remains. The future fight is not only about having signals. It is about knowing which signals deserve trust. This is a major shift. For decades, GPS felt like an answer. Now, in contested environments, GPS becomes a question. Is this real? Is this clean? Is this being manipulated? Does this coordinate match other sensors? Does the inertial system agree? Does the visual terrain match? Does the timing look suspicious? That turns navigation into counterintelligence. The machine is no longer just calculating position. It is judging reality. And that judgment has to happen fast, because war does not pause while a system thinks. Spoofing attacks the mind of the network. It whispers a false reality into the machine and waits to see whether the machine believes it. That is why trust may become the most important GPS feature of all. An enemy does not need to destroy GPS satellites to attack GPS. That is one of the most important points in this entire episode. Destroying satellites is difficult, escalatory, and strategically dangerous. It can create debris, trigger political consequences, and reveal capabilities. But local disruption is much easier. A jammer on the ground, a spoofing device near a port, interference near a battlefield, cyber attacks against supporting systems, or attacks on receivers can all create effects without touching the satellites themselves. The GPS constellation can remain in orbit, healthy and broadcasting, while users in a specific area still struggle. This is like poisoning the water at the tap instead of blowing up the reservoir. The source may be intact, but the user cannot safely drink. This changes how America has to defend GPS. It cannot only defend space, it has to defend the link between space and the user. That link includes satellites, ground control, signals, receivers, antennas, software, training, procedures, and backups. Every part matters. A modern military system is rarely defeated at the strongest point. It is usually pressured at the seam. The seam is where the satellite signal meets the receiver. The seam is where data meets trust. The seam is where a soldier assumes the screen is right. The seam is where a weapon expects coordinates to be clean. That is where adversaries will look. They will search for cheap ways to create doubt. They will try to make America spend more attention verifying than acting. They will not always try to blind the giant. Sometimes they will just smudge the giant's glasses. GPS is powerful, but power traveling through a weak signal has to be protected all the way down to the user. Space is now a battlefield because Earth depends on it. That sentence explains the whole transformation. For years, many people treated space as distant, scientific, and almost separate from everyday conflict. But military space is not distant in effect. It is close because its services reach directly into the battlefield. Satellites support communications, missile warning, weather forecasting, reconnaissance, surveillance, navigation, timing, and targeting. GPS is one of the clearest examples. A satellite thousands of miles away can affect whether a soldier, ship, aircraft, or weapon understands where it is. That makes space infrastructure part of terrestrial combat. The battle may happen on land or sea, but part of the nervous system is above the atmosphere. This is why countries invest in counterspace capabilities. They understand that modern militaries project power through satellites. But the fight for space is not only lasers, missiles, and dramatic anti-satellite tests. It is also electronic warfare, cyber intrusion, deception, interference, ground station attacks, supply chain vulnerabilities, and legal gray zones. The most likely attacks may be less cinematic than people imagine. A satellite does not have to explode for space power to be weakened. A signal can be jammed. A receiver can be fooled. A ground system can be disrupted. A data link can be degraded. Space warfare often looks like a service becoming unreliable at the worst possible time. GPS turns this into a simple lesson. If your army needs space to fight on Earth, then space is part of the battlefield, not tomorrow, now. And if space is part of the battlefield, then the invisible systems above us are no longer background infrastructure. They are strategic terrain. M-code is one answer to the problem. In simple terms, M-code is a modernized military GPS signal designed to give U.S. and allied forces stronger, more secure, more resilient access than older signals. Do not think of it as a magic shield. Think of it as upgrading the lock on a critical door. The old door may still function, but the threat has changed. Jammers are better. Spoofers are better. Adversaries understand. GPS, better. So the military needs signals that are harder to disrupt and easier to trust. M-code is part of that modernization effort. It is meant to improve anti-jam performance, security, and military utility. That matters because the future battlefield will not politely leave GPS alone. But modernization is never just about the satellites. This is the mistake people make. They imagine that if a new satellite broadcasts a better signal, the problem is solved. But users need receivers that can process that signal. Platforms need integration. Aircraft, ships, vehicles, weapons, and handheld devices need upgrades. Testing has to happen. Training has to happen. Procurement has to move. Old equipment has to be replaced or modified. That takes years, sometimes decades. This is why military modernization often feels slow from the outside. The satellite is only one part of the organism. If the brain sends a new kind of instruction, but the nerves cannot carry it, the body does not benefit fully. M-code represents the right direction, but it also reveals the scale of dependency. America cannot simply invent resilience. It has to install resilience across a huge force. That is hard, expensive, and necessary. The signal from space may be invisible, but the upgrade path on Earth is very real. Modernization is hard because GPS is not one object. It is a system of systems. There are satellites in orbit, ground control stations, launch schedules, user equipment, military receivers, software updates, testing programs, acquisition delays, allied compatibility issues, and platform integration problems. Every piece has its own timeline. Every delay can affect the whole chain. This is common in defense technology. The PowerPoint version moves cleanly. The real world moves through budgets, contractors, testing failures, changing requirements, supply issues, and old hardware that refuses to disappear. GPS modernization is no different. It is not enough to say, build better satellites. The real question is, can the better capability reach the warfighter in time, at scale, and under combat conditions? This matters because adversaries do not wait for modernization to finish. They adapt while America upgrades. They test jammers. They study spoofing. They observe conflicts where GPS disruption appears. They learn how commercial drones behave. They learn how ships react. They learn where dependence is strongest. That creates a race. On one side, America tries to harden the system. On the other side, adversaries try to exploit the gap between the future system and the current one. The most dangerous period is often the transition. Old systems are still in use. New systems are not everywhere yet. Training is uneven. Confidence varies. That is when a force can look modern on paper, but remain exposed in practice. The lesson is simple. A space-based infrastructure is only as strong as its weakest operational link. If the satellite is advanced but the receiver is outdated, the advantage is delayed. If the receiver is capable but the unit has not trained under denial, the advantage is fragile. Modernization is not a purchase. It is a transformation. The receiver is the bottleneck most people never think about. Satellites get attention because they are expensive, impressive, and dramatic. Rockets launch them. Space agencies track them. Journalists write about them. But the receiver is where the signal becomes useful. A GPS satellite can broadcast the most advanced military signal in the world, but if the user's equipment cannot receive, process, authenticate, or protect that signal, the advantage stays in space. That is like building a powerful radio station while half the audience still owns broken radios. The broadcast exists. The benefit does not arrive. Military GPS depends on that final step. The signal has to become trusted information in the hands of soldiers, pilots, sailors, machines, weapons, and commanders. This is why upgrading receivers across a large military is so difficult. Each platform has its own constraints. A fighter aircraft has space, power, certification, and safety requirements. A ship has integration needs. A missile has size and cost limitations. A ground vehicle has ruggedness requirements. A handheld device has battery and usability concerns. You cannot simply plug in a new device and declare victory. In a military system, every change has consequences. Does it work with existing software? Does it survive heat, vibration, water, dust, shock, and electromagnetic interference? Can it be repaired? Can it be produced at scale? Can allies use compatible systems? Can troops trust it under stress? The receiver is where strategy becomes reality. It is also where delay becomes dangerous. The satellites may represent national power, but the receiver represents battlefield power. Until the signal reaches the user in a trusted, resilient way, GPS modernization remains unfinished. The last mile is not glamorous. It is decisive. Backups are not a sign that GPS is weak. They are a sign that GPS is important. Any system that matters this much needs alternatives. Inertial navigation is one backup. It uses internal sensors to estimate movement from a known starting point. It does not need outside signals in the same way GPS does, which makes it useful under jamming, but it can drift over time. Celestial navigation is older, using stars and astronomical references. It sounds ancient, but old methods can become valuable again when satellites are contested. Terrain matching, visual navigation, radio navigation, signals from other sources, high-quality clocks, maps, compasses, and disciplined procedures all form part of the resilience toolkit. The future is not GPS or no GPS. The future is layered PNT with multiple ways to answer where, how, and when. Think of GPS like the main highway. It is fast, efficient, and everyone prefers it. But if the highway closes, a serious transportation system needs side roads, rail lines, local routes, maps, and drivers who know how to adapt. Backups may be slower. They may carry less traffic. They may require more skill, but they prevent paralysis. Military PNT works the same way. A force that can only operate on the highway is vulnerable. A force that can shift between highways, side roads, and footpaths is harder to stop. That is why training matters as much as technology. A backup method is not useful if nobody practices it until the crisis begins. Pilots, sailors, soldiers, and commanders need to understand what degraded operations feel like. They need to know what confidence looks like when GPS is gone. Resilience is not only equipment, it is muscle memory. And muscle memory has to be built before the signal disappears. The old skills are returning because the future is not replacing the past. It is forcing the past and future to work together. A military can have satellites, AI, drones, hypersonic weapons, and digital command networks, yet still need people who understand maps, compasses, stars, terrain, and manual procedures. That may sound backward, but it is actually a sign of maturity. The most advanced force is not the one that depends blindly on advanced tools. It is the one that can keep operating when advanced tools are attacked. The old navigator with a chart and the young operator with a digital display are not enemies. They are layers in the same survival system. This creates an interesting cultural challenge. Convenience weakens skills when those skills are not practiced. Anyone who grew up with smartphone navigation understands this. You can live in a city for years and still not know the streets because the phone does the thinking. Then one day, the battery dies, and suddenly, the city becomes a maze. Militaries face the same problem at a higher level. If GPS is always available during training, people may unconsciously build habits around perfect information. They may trust icons too quickly. They may forget how to question the map. They may lose comfort with uncertainty. That is dangerous, because the enemy gets a vote. The enemy will not fight inside your best-case training environment. They will try to create the worst-case environment. Old skills are a hedge against that. They slow down collapse. They give humans something to fall back on when the digital picture becomes suspicious. In the next war, the winner may not be the side with the newest tool. It may be the side that remembers how to fight when the newest tool is degraded. Resilient PNT is the real goal, not perfect GPS, not GPS forever, not a fantasy where enemies politely leave space signals alone. Resilient PNT means the force can still position, navigate, and keep time even when the main system is attacked. It means using GPS when available, protecting it when possible, checking it when necessary, and backing it up when denied. It means combining satellites, inertial systems, terrestrial signals, clocks, sensors, maps, visual references, and procedures into a layered architecture. The word layered matters because no single layer is invincible. The point is not to make failure impossible. The point is to make failure local, temporary, detectable, and survivable. This is similar to layered air defense. One interceptor cannot protect everything. So militaries use sensors, jammers, decoys, short-range defenses, long-range missiles, aircraft, and command networks. Each layer covers a weakness in another layer. PNT needs the same mindset. GPS is one layer, a powerful layer, but still one layer. If GPS is jammed, the system should shift. If a signal is spoofed, the system should detect inconsistency. If timing becomes suspicious, the network should compare sources. If a receiver loses confidence, the platform should know what degraded mode means. This is not just engineering, it is doctrine. It changes how units plan missions. It changes how commanders think about risk. It changes how weapons are designed. It changes how exercises are run. Resilient PNT is America admitting that the invisible grid will be attacked, then building a force that does not panic when the grid bends. That may be the difference between a fragile, high-tech military and a truly modern one. The war over GPS is really a war over trust. That is the deepest layer. At first, GPS answers a simple question, where am I? Then it answers a deeper question, when is this happening? But in contested war, the most important question becomes, can I trust this? Trust is the difference between data and decision. A commander can receive a coordinate, but if the coordinate is suspicious, the decision slows. A weapon can receive a signal, but if the signal is false, the weapon becomes dangerous in the wrong way. A drone can follow a route, but if the route is based on manipulated location data, autonomy becomes vulnerability. The enemy does not always need to remove information. Sometimes, they only need to make information questionable. This is why future systems will need to behave less like simple receivers and more like skeptical analysts. They will compare GPS with inertial data. They will compare timing sources. They will look for signal anomalies. They will check whether movement makes physical sense. They will ask whether a sudden position shift is real or artificial. They will use multiple sensors to judge one reality. In human terms, this is like learning not to believe every message that appears on your phone. The message may look official. It may use the right logo. It may arrive at the right time. But if something feels off, you verify. Machines need a version of that instinct. The battlefield will be full of signals pretending to be truth. GPS trust will become part of information warfare. The side that can verify reality faster will decide faster. The side that hesitates will lose tempo. And tempo, in modern war, can be more valuable than firepower. Decision advantage depends on timing. This connects GPS directly to the larger idea of modern warfare. The side that sees first, understands first, decides first, and acts first can shape the battle before the other side fully reacts. That is the logic behind the OODA loop. Observe, orient, decide, act. GPS supports that loop in quiet ways. It helps observations carry location and time. It helps orientation by aligning data. It helps decisions by increasing confidence. It helps action by guiding movement and weapons. It does not replace judgment. It accelerates the conditions around judgment. That is why GPS belongs inside the concept of decision advantage. It is not just a tool for movement, it is a tool for reducing uncertainty. Now, flip the idea around. If an enemy disrupts GPS, they are not only attacking navigation, they are attacking the speed of the decision cycle. The commander may need more confirmation. The network may need more checks. The platform may need backup procedures. The weapon may need another guidance method. The logistics planner may need slower tracking. The drone may need human intervention. Each extra step adds friction. One extra step may not matter. Hundreds of extra steps across a theater can change the tempo of a campaign. This is how an invisible signal becomes strategic. It sits underneath the rhythm of decisions. In war, rhythm matters. A boxer who controls rhythm can force the opponent to react late. A military that controls timing can make the enemy fight inside a slower reality. GPS helped America build fast reality. That is why adversaries want to contest it. They do not just want America lost. They want America late. What is America really buying when it invests in GPS and its supporting architecture? Not just satellites, not just ground stations, not just receivers, not just launch contracts. America is buying tempo. It is buying precision. It is buying confidence. It is buying synchronization. It is buying the ability to connect a sensor in one place with a shooter somewhere else. It is buying the ability to move supplies through a global network. It is buying the ability to launch aircraft, route ships, guide weapons, align communications, and keep command systems moving on a shared clock. GPS spending looks technical on paper, but strategically, it buys freedom of action. It lets the U.S. military operate at scale without every unit becoming isolated in its own little bubble of uncertainty. That is why GPS should be understood like a military utility, not a weapon in the classic sense, but a utility that makes many weapons better. Electricity does not cook the meal by itself, but without it, the kitchen changes. Roads do not deliver supplies by themselves, but without them, logistics slows. Fuel does not win the battle alone, but without it, vehicles stop. GPS belongs in that family of hidden enablers. It multiplies the value of other systems. A stealth bomber, a destroyer, a drone, a missile, an artillery battery, and a command network all become more effective when they can trust position and timing. This is the force multiplier logic. The investment is not only in the thing itself, it is in everything the thing enables. That is why the debate should not be, how much does GPS cost? The better question is, how much combat power has been built on the assumption that GPS works? The nightmare scenario is not a Hollywood blackout where every satellite falls from the sky at once. The more realistic nightmare is selective doubt. A crisis begins. Tensions rise. Ships move into position. Aircraft deploy. Drones launch. Logistics networks surge. Commanders expect pressure, but not total chaos. Then GPS interference appears in specific regions. Some units report jamming. Others report strange position jumps. A few systems disagree with their inertial backups. Commercial shipping near the theater slows down. Civil aviation reroutes. Drones require more manual control. Weapons planners become more cautious with certain coordinates. Nobody knows at first whether this is a technical problem, electronic attack, spoofing campaign, cyber effect, or all of them together. The system still works in many places, but confidence is no longer universal. That is the kind of scenario that scares planners because it attacks the gray zone between peace and open war. If a satellite is destroyed, the attack is obvious. If a signal is locally manipulated, attribution becomes harder. Was it a state actor, a proxy, a ship, a ground vehicle, a hidden transmitter, a cyber intrusion, a commercial malfunction? The confusion itself becomes part of the attack. Meanwhile, commanders have to make decisions. Do they escalate? Do they strike the source? Are they sure where the source is? Are they being baited? Can they trust the coordinates used to respond? This is why GPS warfare is not only technical, it is strategic psychology. It can create doubt at exactly the moment when speed matters most. The nightmare is not that America forgets how to fight. The nightmare is that America has to fight while constantly asking whether the invisible grid underneath the fight is telling the truth. The future grid will not be GPS alone. It will be GPS plus backups, GPS plus verification, GPS plus anti-jam technology, GPS plus better antennas, GPS plus inertial systems, GPS plus alternative timing sources, GPS plus AI-assisted anomaly detection, GPS plus allied systems, GPS plus procedures for denial. That future is less elegant than the simple dream of one perfect signal from space, but it is more realistic. The battlefield is becoming too contested for single-point dependence. Every critical service needs layers. Communications need layers. Air defense needs layers. Targeting needs layers. PNT needs layers. The goal is not to prevent every attack. The goal is to keep the force coherent while under attack. This may lead to a strange kind of progress. The military will become more advanced by becoming less dependent on any one advanced system. Drones will learn to navigate with vision, terrain, and inertial data. Ships will train harder for degraded navigation. Aircraft will fuse multiple sources. Weapons will combine guidance methods. Networks will compare clocks. Receivers will become more skeptical. Commanders will plan missions assuming GPS may be contested from the beginning. That mindset is the real upgrade. Technology matters, but assumptions matter more. If a force assumes GPS is guaranteed, it builds fragile plans. If a force assumes GPS will be attacked, it builds resilient plans. America's challenge is to keep the advantages of GPS without becoming trapped by them. That means treating GPS like oxygen in a submarine. Essential, monitored, protected, and backed up. Nobody celebrates oxygen when the system works, but every sailor understands what happens when it does not. GPS is becoming that kind of infrastructure. Invisible, essential, and dangerous to take for granted. The final reveal is simple. GPS is not the map. GPS is the clock. The map is what people see, because the blue dot feels magical. But the deeper power is time. Precise time lets machines measure distance from satellites. Precise time lets networks align. Precise time lets sensors compare data. Precise time lets weapons, aircraft, ships, drones, logistics systems, and command centers move inside the same rhythm. That rhythm is one of the hidden foundations of American military power. It is why GPS became far more than a convenience. It became an invisible military pillar, a space-based infrastructure that touches almost everything, often without being noticed. And that is why adversaries will keep trying to jam it, spoof it, deceive it, degrade it, and make America question it. They understand that the strongest militaries are not only defeated by destroying their biggest weapons, sometimes they are slowed by attacking the systems that make those weapons work together. GPS is one of those systems. It is a ruler, a clock, a guide, a synchronizer, and a trust layer. It helps America move faster than distance should allow. But the next era of war will test whether that speed can survive when the signal becomes contested. The side that wins may not be the side with the most satellites, or the most missiles, or the most expensive platforms. It may be the side that can still understand reality when the easy signal disappears. Because in modern warfare, losing the map is dangerous, but losing the clock is worse.